In the previous video, we looked at how care worker reviews can be scheduled and their outcomes recorded as plain text using the current version of Platt. I've now switched to the next version of Platt, which you will probably already have access to by the time you watch this video. We're going to start by looking at new tools provided here for planning and monitoring progress in the completion of any follow-up actions that may arise from a completed care worker review. Perhaps additional training requirements are identified during the review, or you have some concerns about the care worker's performance that you wish to monitor over the coming weeks. We'll click on John Coffey's March 17th supervision and see how this event looks slightly different in this version of Platt. Notice that the free text outcomes field is no longer provided here, and instead we see this summary telling us how many words have been entered and providing a link for accessing the full text. The reason for these notes being moved to their own dialog is the inclusion of this new tab, which I can use to record any next steps arising from this review. I'll add 2 next steps to John's supervision, as well as elaborating on the notes. As long as at least 10 words are entered here, you will now see this prompt when saving the findings and outcomes for a completed care worker review. Here, I'm being asked whether the notes and next steps that I have entered are complete and ready to be shared with the care worker. I can select No if I intend to come back and make further changes to these details later. When I'm ready to finalize and share the findings and outcomes for this review, I answer yes to this prompt. This will trigger an email to be sent to John, providing him with a copy of the notes. As we can see, if we drill down to the review's findings and outcomes again, after they've been shared with John, the notes field is now read-only. Once they've been shared, further changes are not allowed. The other thing you'll notice is that the Next Steps tab has been replaced by this Follow-up Actions tab, with each of my next steps now shown here with checkboxes for recording their completion. As I, or one of my colleagues, makes progress in completing these follow-up actions, notes can be recorded. You can even click on the paperclip icon to attach files, perhaps records of book training or other photographs or documents generated in the process of completing these actions. Each time one of the follow-up actions is completed, the event itself will be updated to reflect this. A report is available to help you keep track of incomplete follow-up items across the team. For help with accessing this report, please talk to your support provider. So far, findings and outcomes of completed care worker reviews have been captured using a free text notes field. Whilst this may be suitable for certain types of review, there are likely to be cases where specific questions should always be answered and specific details always provided, or at least asked for. In this case, rather than capturing plain text, a structured form with fields would be a better choice. This version of Platt enables the findings and outcomes of care worker reviews to be captured using a fully customizable form of your design. You can have a different form for each review type, or even use forms that are unique to one or to a small number of specific care workers. To set up a form to be used for this purpose, select Custom Forms from the Setup menu and then click New. For the demo care organization, an example form has already been provided. The most important detail on the first tab is this Can Apply To field. You must select Care Worker Review here. As you can see, after that selection is made and the form saved, the field will be locked. If there are certain follow-up actions that should always be performed after completing a review of this type, you can use this Default Next Steps field to define these. We'll see later how this list will define the initial contents of the Next Steps tab when you begin recording findings and outcomes for a completed review. Changes can always be made though, including removing the default items if they are not relevant in a particular case. The Fields tab is where most of our time will be spent. This is where we specify parameters for each of the fields that will be provided when recording the findings and outcomes for care worker reviews that use this form. In this example, just one section has been defined. If you would like your form to be tabbed, with each tab displaying a group of related fields, add more than one section. If I click here to expand all, you'll see that the example form consists of 6 fields under the heading of Data Protection Audit and several more under the heading of Good Character Risk Assessment. The form editor that you see here is the same one that is used for thread-based forms and for care plan structures. Further information about its use can be seen in previous videos. Now I have a form defined for capturing supervision outcomes, I need to associate it with my supervision event type. To do this, I will return to Demo Care's Reviews tab, which we briefly looked at in the previous video. Notice how entries in this list now come with an additional field, Findings and Outcomes form. I can continue to capture findings and outcomes as free text by leaving this field blank, or alternatively, type in the first few letters of my form's name. Having chosen to use a form for my supervisions going forward, let's go back now to John Coffey's calendar and drill down to his completed supervision. You'll notice that we still have our plain text notes here. Although I have changed DemoCare's reviews configuration, that change does not affect historical data. Now though, if I schedule a follow-up review for John, this will use the form that we've just been looking at. So let's do that now. If we want to see DemoCare's custom form in action, I'm going to need to schedule John's follow-up review for some time in the past, because, just as we saw with plain text findings and outcomes, form-based outcomes can only be recorded once the planned start date of the review has been reached. Despite DemoCare only requiring supervisions to be performed every 18 weeks, this means that, purely for the purpose of this demonstration, I need to schedule John's follow-up supervision for the very next day. After assigning myself to the review, we'll click on this link that we've previously used to access the plain text findings and outcomes. But now, in place of the Notes tab we've previously seen, here's our custom form ready for me to fill in, with 6 fields under the heading of Data Protection Audit, followed by all of the Good Character Risk Assessment fields. As well as this tab, with all of our form fields, we're also provided with the same Next Steps tab that we saw earlier in this video. Notice how this has been pre-populated with the default next steps list from our custom form definition. While recording outcomes or next steps for a follow-on review, I may want to look back at the previous review to check on progress with its follow-up actions, or just generally familiarize myself with the outcomes of the earlier event. To see details of this care worker's previous review of the same type, click here. The previous review will open in a new window, which I can close when I'm ready to return to the later event. I'll very quickly make some selections from a few of these fields. Before saving. As I've failed to provide values for some of the required fields, I am notified of this now and can either cancel if I want to go back and complete the required fields immediately, or select OK if I plan to do so later. After saving the form, whether completed or not, the event will be updated. Notice I'm told what percentage of the required fields I have completed so far. In most cases, we do expect that custom findings and outcomes forms will be completed using Platt in the way that I have just demonstrated. However, for staff who have access to a tablet, there may also be the option for them to complete the form using Platt's Point of Care app. I'll bring across another browser window here to show you what that would look like. After logging into Platt Point of Care, I'll navigate back to the day when John's follow-up supervision will have taken place. Notice we have the red cross to inform me that the findings and outcomes form is not complete. I'll click on that icon, and that will give me access to the form where I can provide values for all of the remaining required fields. Because the form is now complete, we see the prompts that we saw after completing the plain text outcomes for John's first supervision. Do I want to finalize the details of this supervision now and share them with John? If I reply yes to this prompt, a PDF with all of the details from the completed form will be generated and sent by email to John. Let's return to Platt now and refresh John's calendar. Notice how I'm told that the review, findings and outcomes are published. And when I click to review these, the form is no longer editable.